Well, let's get the small business out of the way first. Rishi Sunak played the role of shoeshine boy to Sir Keir Starmer, the new British Prime Minister, today at the first Prime Minister's question time of the new Parliament. It was a somnolent affair, joyless, as Quentin Letts peerlessly put it in his Daily Mail sketch of the event. Joyless and practically questionless. There are one or two or four or five dissident voices in the House of Commons, though none of them, predictably, managed to catch the Speaker's eye today. Not even Nigel Farage, speaking for 4 million voters with his mere 5 members of Parliament. It was business as it intends to become usual. It was the leaden-footed, wooden-topped Keir Starmer giving monotone, nasal and utterly banal responses to softball questions like, will you give my best wishes to Britain's Olympic team as they prepare to open the Games in Paris at the weekend? The reality is British politics has been gutted of all content. They were there on both sides of the chamber, like fish on the fishmonger slab, their mouths open but nothing coming out. It was an utterly depressing spectacle, and frankly, if you'll forgive me, I was rather glad that I didn't have to be there. The potential for political division has been further tightened and narrowed. There was a vote last evening to lift the 2-child cap on child benefit. A family with more than 2 children would get about an extra £20 a week, which they'd be unlikely to gamble at the casino, unlikely to spend in Saint-Tropez, much more likely to spend in the local shops in the British economy, and thus providing a pump-priming, kick-starting boost to the economy. It would have cost £1.6 billion. But the government, led by Keir Starmer, that promised £3 billion a year to the gangster Zelensky forever, for 100 years, £3 billion for 100 years, promised by the same government that says we cannot afford for our poorest children to get an extra £20 a week into the household budget. If you think about it, demographically, it is an entirely foolish move. We should be trying to boost our birth rate. We have an aging population. We have a demographic time bomb in a country that doesn't want mass immigration and penalizes people for having more than 2 children. Do the maths. It is utterly berserk to implement a policy that can only further depress a declining birth rate in the country. But that's what they did under the Conservatives. And now that the new Conservative Party is in power, they are going to continue doing exactly the same thing. Labour had a magnificent 7 moment last evening. 7 Labour members of Parliament rebelled against Keir Starmer in the name of fighting child poverty for £20 a week to the poorest families in Britain, and were immediately suspended and informed today, anonymously in a briefing to the media, that they will not be allowed to stand as Labour members of Parliament in the next general election. They contained some big names, some small names, but people like Rebecca Long-Bailey, who ran for the leadership against Keir Starmer, was one of them, a devoutly Catholic woman. She could not possibly put her vote behind an attempt to starve poor children. Tom Watson, who was a very, very fat man who watered the workers' beer for many decades, then became a very, very thin man and is now a very, very fat man again, who admits to eating 2.5 kilograms of cheese every 2 days. He opined that the magnificent 7 Labour MPs need never darken Labour's door again. The poor children not having enough food leaves more for Lord Tom Watson to eat, for that is what he is now called. So the House of Commons today was a miserable rubber stamp uni-party affair. And the Conservative conduct of affairs, today at least, led no one to believe that there's going to be a genuine opposition in British politics, at least coming from them. Maybe the 7 will link up with the 5. That would be a significant parliamentary grouping. 12 members of Parliament to the left of the Labour government, when everyone else is in the solid, stolid centre, would at least provide something of a beacon of hope for people in the country. And I strongly encourage those 7, none of whom are friends of mine, nor I friends of theirs, to join up with the 5 Gaza independent MPs and at least provide some opposition. As a 12-member group, they would have status in the House of Commons and would not, like Nigel Farage today, be able easily to be ignored. 7 dwarves have lined up at the starting gate for the Tory leadership contest. James, not so cleverly, the erstwhile Foreign Secretary or erstwhile Home Secretary, may think that he has a march on the others, having held 2 of the 4 great offices of state. Certainly he will not be much challenged by someone called Mel Stride. I don't even know if Mel Stride is a man or a woman. I've been in Parliament over almost 40 years, and I've never heard of a Mel Stride. But there he is, apparently a he. Can't be sure nowadays. He may be a man with a cervix, he may be a woman with a penis, who knows. But Mel Stride will not be making many strides forward. But the, if you'll forgive me, dark horses are undoubtedly Kemi Badenoch and Suella Braverman. That will be a decision of some importance. If Suella Braverman becomes the Tory party leader, then a merger between the Tories and Nigel Farage would appear to be all but certain. Britain has no room for 2 nasty, Islamophobic, and oftentimes racist right-wing parties. Why not bring the 2 of them together? If they go for cleverly, maybe they'll be opting for a more moderate course. If they go for Badenoch, they'd definitely be doing themselves a favour. For she is by far and away the outstanding candidate in that donkey derby. We'll keep you posted over the weeks in which this long slither of Tory leadership hopefuls continues. Now on to more significant business. Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in Washington and is right now on his feet, being ovated repeatedly. Ovated, I said. Bloviated, maybe, but ovated by the best part of hundreds of Congress and Senate members in Washington. He's far, far more popular in Washington than he is in Israel, where hundreds of thousands of people gather practically nightly to try to overthrow him. And indeed, the General Staff of the Israeli Armed Forces reportedly, but furtively, discuss ways that they might overthrow him. But in Washington, he is the flavour of the moment. We'll bring you more on the ovations in the couple of hours that we have left in this show. That will be followed, we're told, with the first proof of life of the President of the United States. For a week, the whole world has not been able to know for sure whether or not the leader of NATO, whether or not the president of the world's most powerful country, whether or not the president of the man with presidency of the man with his finger on the nuclear button was alive or dead. And if he was alive, what state was he in? Does he have Parkinson's? Does he have Alzheimer's? Does he have just advanced senility? Or does he have all 3 of these afflictions? How can we know? He hasn't had a cabinet meeting since last September. So his cabinet have not been in a position to judge whether to implement the 25th Amendment of the US Constitution and declare him not to be fit to discharge his duties and his responsibilities. That has to be a deliberate act on the part of the president. That means that for at least 9 months, the people closest to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, as vice president, the closest of all, must have known that this man was not capable of discharging the responsibilities that he had. Crooks, the gunman in Pennsylvania, missed Donald Trump, but he appears to have hit Joe Biden. Joe Biden unexpectedly quit with a tweet, an X, a PDF of a resignation letter, signed rather oddly if you compare the signature with other Joe Biden signatures. He precipitously quit as the leader of the NATO war machine, leaving his hirelings and satraps in the European governments looking like proper plonkers and looking down the barrel of a Donald Trump presidency. And so, if ever you have seen a demonstration of the parallel universe in which our politicians and our mainstream media live, then you haven't seen the incredible outpouring of Kamala mania in Western newspapers over the last couple of days. Suddenly, she has, like a metamorphosis of a slug into a butterfly, been presented to us as a dancing, singing, somewhat sexy 57-year-old with not a cackle but a cheery smile for everyone. And what a breath of fresh air, according to the Western media, she's going to bring to the fetid corridors of the White House in Washington. What a relief she's going to be. And lo and behold, the pollsters have begun coordinating their propaganda with the Western media output. Suddenly there's a poll showing her 2 points ahead of Donald Trump, even though Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, together as a double act, were at least 5 points behind them only a couple of days before. It's synchronized swimming in public relations guff. Kamala Harris is a woman who had to give up her run for the presidency in the elections of 2020 because she did not obtain one single delegate in the entire primary process. She had to give up even before going before her own voters in California. She gave up in a whimper because she had been so roundly humiliated. They say that she's a black woman. In fact, she's an Indian woman, or that's how she used to identify before it became more politically profitable to describe herself as a black woman. But black or brown, Kamala Harris has precisely 1% of support amongst black voters, not least because she imprisoned a small nation of black people when the chief prosecutor and attorney general in the state of California. She is a complete fraud, repackaged as the greatest thing since sliced brown bread. Now, the question is, did Joe Biden jump or was he pushed? Is he gravely ill? Is he compos mentis? Is he even alive? Will he even show up for the public showing of his vivacity this evening? And if he is vivacious, why has he given up? He told us repeatedly over and over and over again until hours before he quit without consulting or even telling any of his campaign team and all those that were out there batting for him. Why did he quit? Does he have a grave illness? Is he terminally ill? And if he is any of these things that we suspect that he is, how can he continue to be the president. Maybe it's because they know that as president, Kamala Harris will be quickly found out to be the cackling hyena that she truly is. And they'd rather keep her as candidate Kamala than President Harris. That may be the thinking, the reasoning behind it. Or perhaps this evening he's going to fall on his sword. We'll talk about all of that with our two American guests this evening. I've only time to turn to the extraordinary statement of the Chief of the General Staff of the British Armed Forces. When I say armed forces, I mean 73,000, including clerks, 73,000, including sailors, including airmen and airwomen, 73,000, including the entire fighting strength of the British Armed Forces. I say that not to disparage them. I'm a former boy soldier myself and an activist for a time in the charity run by the comedian Jim Davidson, Help for Heroes. The British Armed Forces are an emaciated wreck. They are deploying kit, equipment and weapons that are not capable of fighting Finland, never mind fighting the coalition of Russia, China, Iran and North Korea. Why do I make that point? Well, the Chief of the General Staff has told us, you better get ready, you better put it in your diary, that in 3 years' time, that is to say, by the summer of 2027, make a note of it, we will be at war with all four of these nuclear-armed, hypersonically, intercontinentally, ballistically armed forces with millions upon millions upon millions of soldiers, sailors, and airmen. Now, on one level, you've got to laugh. The idea of the Chief of the General Staff, weighed down by the gold braid on his hat and his shoulders, who, so far as I know, has never actually faced a shot in anger, crying advance to those in the front rank who promptly die, and then presumably advocating for the use of Britain's only military asset, namely its nuclear weapons, though they can only be fired with American agreement. There's a dual key arrangement. The key has to be turned in Washington, just at the same time as it's turned in London, and bringing about the end of not just every single person in Britain, every man, woman and child in Britain, every dog and cat, every bird, every fox, every deer, every plant, every tree, the complete incineration of our entire island caused by firing a nuclear weapon at someone who promptly fire 10 of them back at us. You don't know whether to laugh or cry, do you? But that's what the Chief of the British Armed Forces has just informed us is going to be happening in just 3 years' time. I'm going to talk in a minute to a man who knows a thing or two about war and the politics behind it, the one and only Scott Ritter, just in a moment. Stay tuned.